listen to podcasts of Joe Walsh and Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. So you're hearing from some of your 50-year-old girlfriends, huh?
Yeah, I haven't, we're keeping it tight. We're keeping it real.
Right.
That came out wrong. But, I mean, we're still working out in our bodies. Some things shift when you get older, but, we're working on it.
All right.
Okay?
All right. Look, hey, don't.
Shout out to the hotties.
Just
my 49-year-old friends who.
Take it up with Jan.
It's a big year for everybody.
Not me. All right. Yesterday, President Trump addressing the nation, he laid out the case for his proposal. Fundamentally, first principles, a crisis in the nation's heart and soul.
This is a humanitarian crisis, a crisis of the heart and a crisis of the soul.
And to address the crisis, the president proposed the following.
The proposal from Homeland Security includes cutting-edge technology for detecting drugs, weapons, illegal contraband, and many other things. We have requested more agents, immigration judges, and bed space to process the sharp rise in unlawful migration fueled by our very strong economy. Our plan also contains an urgent request for humanitarian assistance and medical support. Furthermore, we have asked Congress to close border security loopholes so that illegal immigrant children can be safely and humanely returned back home. Finally, as part of an overall approach to border security, law enforcement professionals have requested $5.7 billion for a physical barrier. At the request of Democrats, it will be a steel barrier rather than a concrete wall. This barrier is absolutely critical to border security. It's also what our professionals at the border want and need. This is just common sense.
And also, and it was important the president outlined those specifics because this is about more than just the physical structure, but it necessarily includes the physical barrier. He said something else at the outset of his speech that I thought was worth mentioning, although he didn't delve deeply into it. Americans are hurt, all Americans, hurt by uncontrolled illegal migration. It strains public resources, drives down jobs and wages. Among those hardest hit, African Americans and Hispanic Americans. Our southern border is a pipeline for vast quantities of illegal drugs, including meth, heroin, cocaine, fentanyl, and he went on from there. That is an important point, and it redounds to the local level. And you also have individuals like this gentleman, Hilario Yanez, writing in Fox News, who's a dreamer, and supports the deal that's been on the table for 18 months. Border security funding along the lines of what the president proposed.
Right, in exchange for pathway to citizenship for dreamers.
Right.
It seems like a no-brainer, but the Dems didn't move on it.
And that's the same direction the Wall Street Journal opined, being, sort of critical of both sides, suggesting we didn't really plow much new ground last night with the competing remarks. But there is this deal to be made that's been available for the better part of a year and a half. Switching gears and bringing it local, we're happy to be joined again by Chicago mayoral candidate Amara Enyia. You may know her from being Chance the Rapper's choice for mayor.
Yes, and he's donated to her campaign. And Chance the Rapper retweeted you. And all my kids think you're cool.
Yeah, well,
Mom, you can't have that, but Dan can.
The retweeting did happen. The I'm cool did not happen. But here's the thing. Chance the Rapper, actually, I'm going to try and catch this. Saturday night, Chance the Rapper is going to be with Renee Fleming at the Lyric Opera.
That's right.
Doing a discussion on art. I think that's actually kind of interesting, to bring those two artists together.
Should go.
I wonder if Amara Enyia is getting a piece of the gate at the Lyric Opera for the Chance the Rapper, Renee Fleming thing. We'll ask her. Amara Enyia, candidate for Chicago mayor, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
So you going to be like a surprise guest on Saturday night at the Lyric? Or?
Well, actually, we are doing a fundraiser together on Saturday night after that event.
Oh.
So I might pop in, and then we'll head over to our fundraiser taking place later that night.
Well, before we get to some of the issues, I mean, give us a sense of where your campaign's at, because it generated a lot of attention because of the involvement and support you received from both Chance and Kanye West. How have you been able to translate that into, the resources and the organizational prowess you need to make a go of it in the last 6 weeks here?
Well, it's been absolutely amazing. We've been able to do what no other campaign has been able to do, in part because of the visibility from their support and their endorsement, but also because we just have a message that's resonating with people. We have a campaign that people are actually excited about and that they're eager to get involved. And so one of the biggest benchmarks for us is our campaign submitted the most number of signatures to get on the ballot over and above every other campaign. And that was back in November. That was without millions of dollars in the bank. That was without decades of political favors to call in, and without, frankly, party machinery backing our campaign. Yet we turned in more signatures, 62,000 to be exact, which is more than every other candidate. And from there, we've only gained in momentum. We had volunteers showing up by the hundreds to our trainings, our organizer trainings. We have definitely gone up in the rankings. We had just so much momentum, and we're also not weighed down by the baggage of corruption and the establishment like most of the other candidates are. So
well, speaking of corruption, a lot of your challengers, many of them, of the 15 total, are asking Toni Preckwinkle to step down because of the dirty money she allegedly got from Alderman Ed Burke. What do you think she should do?
Well, we see at least 5 of the candidates as, so there's so much talk about what Chicago needs in the future of Chicago and moving us in the right direction. And yet at least 5 of these candidates all have ties to Ed Burke, have ties to business as usual. And we think it's fraudulent, quite frankly, to position yourself as the thing, as what Chicago needs moving forward when you carry all of this baggage. And so we call them the fraudulent 5. So it's not just President Preckwinkle, it's also Susana Mendoza, it's Gary Chico, it's Gary McCarthy. It's, these are all Bill Daley. They all have ties to corruption. Ed Burke is just one example of a broader business as usual that they all tacitly accepted. And so beyond just the one person, this is about how do we not make the mistake of going with an establishment candidate that has all of these ties to the things that Chicagoans are saying they do not want. They deserve better.
Now, let me
offer that.
Yeah, and let me ask you that too. Is there a changing of the guard going on in black neighborhoods on the west and south side, and I'm including that with respect to black and even Latino aldermen? Ricky Munoz in trouble; he's retiring. Willie Cochran obviously in trouble. A long history of west and south side aldermen being, frankly, pawns of those established powers that you were just ticking off. Is there a generational shift? Is there a leadership change happening in the black communities in Chicago, do you sense?
I definitely think that there is. There is such a frustration and a desire to move away from the status quo, particularly on the south and west side, where it simply has not worked. And in fact, these communities have only gone down in terms of quality across every metric. And people are saying that they are fed up with business as usual. We see that energy definitely with younger voters and younger residents in general. And our campaign has really attracted those millennials who came out to vote in record numbers in the midterm elections. But we're also seeing seniors who are seeing the energy of those younger voters who are not afraid to stand up for themselves, who are not afraid to stand up for their communities, and who, quite frankly, don't feel compelled to align themselves with an establishment that hasn't worked for their communities. They see it, they live it. I live in one of these neighborhoods. We don't need to be told what's happening because our very lived experience evidences the lack of effectiveness of this current crop of leaders. And so that wave of pushing against them, I think, is spreading.
And that kind of campaign that you're going to run with sort of that grassroots, netroots, youthful enthusiasm you're describing, I mean, is that what it's going to be? You're not going to be able to go, dollar for dollar with Bill Daley or Gary Chico on network affiliate television. So it's going to be grassroots and netroots for you, and you're going to try and sort of pull an Ocasio-Cortez and shock the world?
Well, it's definitely going to be a grassroots strategy. I mean, we're raising money, so our goal is, of course, to compete on traditional television. However, we also know that people consume their information differently, that there's nothing that can replace face-to-face contact, and we have that grassroots army across the city. And also our digital strategy, which is where most people are consuming their news and information these days. And so we have an advantage because of how our campaign is positioned, because of our message, and because we're willing to do the work. We're not going to just compete on traditional terms. That's not where the fight is going to be won. And we're also attracting people who've never voted and who've never been involved in the electoral process. And no other candidate is able to do that. Our entire strategy is around getting more people involved, expanding the voter base, and reaching the 70% of people who could have voted in the last election but didn't because they were not inspired by anything that they saw or heard. So our strategy is very different. It's not cynical. It doesn't take the approach of hoping for low voter turnout or rehashing empty talking points. And we don't have the baggage of so many of these other candidates. And I think that's what's attracting people to our campaign.
Yeah, I agree. So what is your opinion on casinos in Chicago and legalizing marijuana? I've asked every candidate that, but that's important to me.
Yes. So I definitely support the legalization of marijuana. I've been pretty vocal on that issue for a number of reasons, although I always have to say that it's not enough just to legalize it. We have to be very intentional about making sure that there are access points into that sector, particularly for groups who have been marginalized when it was illegal, in its illegal status, so that they can participate in this as a legit economic sector. So I'm definitely for legalization. With regard to the casino, I don't think that that's the best option for the city of Chicago in terms of revenue. I think that there are other options that could be a little bit more helpful. So, for example, video gaming is something that helps small businesses in the city. I work in the small business sector in the city. I think by the time all of the different actors that would be a part of the casino get their cut, that the revenue that actually comes back to the city won't be sufficient to do what we think it may do. And it also might have an effect on the existing tourism and restaurant sector as well that might not be helpful.
What about predatory policies? I mean, I would say that the gambling turns out to be a regressive tax on the poor. I mean, a regressive tax by definition on the poor. Lottery ticket sales, they're not concentrated in Winnetka and Kenilworth. They're concentrated on the south and west sides of the city. And I understand that in part that's a function of hopelessness. But, gambling is not a good investment. It's not a real good path up the socioeconomic ladder. And so for the marginal dollars for people struggling to get onto that ladder and up that ladder, it seems to me that's government policy that's not really aligned with the interests of constituents who are not doing as well as we would like them to do. And that goes, frankly, for red light tickets and the seizure of cars. This big WBEC story this week about the city seizing and selling some 50,000 cars over the last 7 years, disproportionately belonging to poor people and families, or working class people and families. The whole concept of aligning city government with the interests of people who are being productive and trying to get ahead.
Yes, and we were the only campaign. So about 2 weeks ago, we actually launched what we call an economic justice platform that goes deeply into the issues of booting people's cars, suspending their licenses so they have no access to transportation to be able to work so that they can pay off whatever tickets they may have accrued. We tackle that issue head on because it is not productive. What we push for instead is productive and progressive, non-punitive measures, which the city hasn't employed. And so if you think about getting a boot on your car, now you can't work, you can't make money, you can't move, so now you don't have the revenue to be able to pay the city anyway. These draconian policies are non-productive, and they actually hurt quality of life and cause people to leave the city. If you think about what's happening with lottery sales, in those very same communities, what is the connection between the revenue that's generated from the lottery and how it is reinvested in communities, or how it's helping those communities? It's not, quite frankly. And when you see how that money is being used by the state or misused, you can see that the people who would benefit from the people purchasing those tickets, who would stand to benefit the most, are not seeing the benefits. And the same is with this casino. You have individuals, because we have not invested in a growth economy, who are spending the little dollars that they have, hoping to generate additional income to do things like put food on the table or pay tickets. That's not productive. And the level of investment or benefit to the communities that they're living in will not It simply will not work. It hasn't worked with the lottery. I don't think that it'll work with the casino.
Something else predatory appears to be some of the personnel of the Chicago public school system over the last 15 years, at least, that the Tribune's looked at it so far. Unbelievable story over the holidays about somebody employed for CPS for a decade while being accused of molesting children outside the district. I wonder what you would do, since CPS, 85% Black and Latino, what you would do to address what appears to be systemic sexual abuse of children in CPS and a cover-up of much of it to boot.
Yes, and a lot of my proposals in education are addressing the systemic issues within CPS. That the level of how rampant this was, hundreds and hundreds of cases, shows that there's some deeply ingrained policies and practices that created a system where this kind of behavior was allowed to happen. And what we're seeing is that it's being forced into light by journalists who are calling this out. This is a culture within Chicago public schools to cover up abuse, to cover up malpractice. We had many scandals that have happened over recent years. The latest CPS CEO was ousted for attempting to essentially submit a fraudulent documentation to allow him to continue practices that were unethical. We had his predecessor going to prison for a $20 million bribery scheme. These things are not aberrations, unfortunately, within CPS. They are systemic problems that are a culture that's been allowed to thrive. And so in our education proposal, we talk about what it means to create a culture of accountability, and that requires transparency. CPS has a habit of hiding information or presenting misinformation to the public when they want, and it takes those of us who've been on the ground, I've been working on these issues for years, to force them to be transparent. They have to have transparency as a hallmark. They have to address the issues of equity that exist, where entire schools and communities are overlooked and do not get the resources that they need. There's just some very deep concerns that have been allowed to thrive for far too long. And that's why people are calling for an elected school board, because they feel that for so long, the CPS board and CPS in general has not been responsive to the needs of parents. And the sexual abuse scandal is only one horrendous example of that.
She is Amara Enyia, the website, amaraenyia.com. That's E-N-Y-I-A, Amara Enyia. She's a candidate for mayor, backed by Chance the Rapper, fundraiser with Chance on Saturday night, so that'll be fun. Amara, thanks so much for joining us, and good luck. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The stories you need to know to start your day. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.